Lemons, they're not just for making lemonade anymore. These little yellow fruits have a long and fascinating history, and they have even changed the course of human history in a big way. Modern medicine too owes one man and his experiment with lemons to how they make medicine. So in my ongoing series on chemicals that change the history of this world, let us look at this small, yellow, innocuous fruit called lemon. Let us see how a chemical with which this fruit is packed changed our history. Can you believe this sour-tasting fruit saved millions of lives, and before a man named James Lind, tens of thousands of people lost their lives for the want of it? Hello, I'm Anand and I welcome you to Pale Blue Thoughts, the channel which denounces pseudoscience and promotes scientific temper. Ahoy mateys, let's get sailing into the rough seas and see how a molecule helped alter human history. The scene was the late 15th century. Spice trade was booming across the world and the entire world was making a beeline to Asia, especially India and the tiny state of Kerala. The reason? They wanted spices that we had in plenty. How spices changed the world history is another topic and I shall make a separate video on it, but for now, let us stick to their voyages. There was a time when small boats were replaced by huge ships called schooners which used sails to sail through the deep seas. This meant that humans could travel for months altogether and reach distant lands. The journeys were often marked with bad weather and lack of fresh food. Food and water for the sailors were hard to come by on such long voyages where you don't get to see land for weeks or even months. You can't cook food in those ships which were almost entirely made of wood and run the risk of burning the entire ship down. So the main rations were salted beef or pork, cheese, fish, ale and a form of ship's biscuit which were very hard to eat. Additionally, sailors very often suffered from a disease and they would start to experience symptoms like fatigue and depression, swollen gums, hands and feet and open wounds that wouldn't heal. Imagine if your teeth and gums and soft tissues such as lungs and kidneys disintegrated and you bled from all parts of the body while you're alive. It was a real pain in the booty. That disease was scurvy, and if it affected you, you have no choice but to die. Vasco da Gama was the first European to reach India by sea. His voyage, which started from Lisbon via Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, was eventful. He started out with 4 ships, but only 2 reached Kapad, Kerala in 1498. For over 9 months, the ships had sailed more than 10,000 kilometers of open ocean, by far the longest journey out of sight of land made by at that time. By the time he reached Cape of Good Hope, he had already lost over 100 of his initial 170 of his crew to scurvy. Another sailor was the famous Ferdinand Magellan, who first attempted to circumnavigate the earth. He also conducted his explorations in search of spices. Magellan's fleet consisted of 5 ships carrying supplies for 2 years of travel. The crew consisted of about 270 men. His journey sadly ended in Philippines where he was forced to land as his crew had to recuperate due to scurvy. Magellan lost 208 out of the initial 230 crew mainly due to scurvy. Magellan himself was killed by the local inhabitants of Philippines. After Magellan's death, Juan Sebastian Elcano took the lead of the expedition and with its few other surviving members in one of the 2 remaining ships completed the first circumnavigation of Earth when they returned to Spain in 1522. Of the 5 ships which started out, only 1 returned and almost all of the people were lost to scurvy. The honor of being the first man to circumnavigate the globe could have gone to Magellan but for the disease called scurvy which forced him to land in Philippines where he was killed. So from the late 15th century to the end of the 16th, countless men had succumbed to scurvy. During the 18th century, scurvy killed more British sailors than wartime enemy action. Explorers like John Anson lost nearly 2/3 of his crew to scurvy. The Royal Navy lost 72% of their force during the 7-year wars, mainly to scurvy. Now was the time for man to beat this terrible disease. In 1593, Sir Richard Hawkins, who was an admiral of the British Navy, claimed that at least 10,000 men had died in the sea due to scurvy, but that lemon juice could have been an immediately effective cure. While James Lind is often credited with proving the benefits of citrus for curing scurvy, we will come to him later, It was Hawkins, more than a century earlier, who was also convinced of the benefits and wrote about it. There is a wonderful secret of the power and wisdom of God, who has hidden so great an unknown virtue in this fruit to be a certain remedy for this illness. Another British sailor named Sir James Lancaster also led a voyage to the East Indies in 1591. His Indian voyage was an important factor in the foundation of the East India Company. In 1601, he was given command of the East India Company's first fleet in his vessel named the Red Dragon. At some point in his travels, Lancaster noted the efficacy of fresh fruit as a preventive for scurvy. In 1601, Lancaster performed an experimental study on the effect of lemon juice. His fleet of 4 ships departed England, and scurvy began appearing in 3 of the ships 4 months after sailing. By the time of arrival in southern Africa, 3 of the 4 ships were so devastated by scurvy that the men of Red Dragon had to assist the rest of the fleet into the harbour. Lancaster's men remained in better health than the men on the other ships because every morning Lancaster gave them 3 spoonfuls of bottled lemon juice that he had taken to sea. This was an early clue that lemon juice had something that cured people of scurvy. So if people knew that lemon juice was an effective treatment for scurvy, why wasn't it enforced as a medicine? There were many reasons for it. The first was that most people did not believe Richard Hawkins and James Lancaster. They continued to believe that salted meat and a lack of fresh meat was the reason. Also, there were logistical issues since it was difficult to keep fresh citrus fruits or juice for several weeks at a time. And in ships, cargo space is precious. They were designed to carry back loads of spices which were worth its weight in gold at the time. So who would waste space by planting lemon trees on ships? But something was very cheap back then: human lives. So most ships were packed with extra people to allow approximately 50% of the people to die due to scurvy, then affect the profit margins. People were enslaved to work in those ships and were left to die. So in those days, to go to work in a ship was similar to walking slowly towards an oncoming train. You were almost sure to die if you went to work on ships. Then comes the turning point in the treatment of scurvy. James Lind, a Scottish surgeon in a ship, did something which revolutionized not just the treatment of scurvy, but paved the way to revolutionize modern medicine and drug discovery. I had done a video earlier on drug discovery in modern medicine, which I will link up here and in the description box for you to watch later. So coming back to James Lind, he is considered the first physician to have conducted a controlled clinical trial of the modern era. Dr. Lind, while working as a surgeon on a ship, was appalled by the high mortality of scurvy among sailors. So in 1747, he selected 12 patients who had scurvy and divided them into 6 groups of 2 sailors each. All of them were given the same food. Additionally, one group was given apple cider, one group was given vinegar, which was acetic acid, another was given vitriol or sulfuric acid, the next 2 were given plain seawater, the 5th group were given a mixture of some spices which resembled an Ayurvedic kashaya recommended by a hospital surgeon. The 6th group were given 1 lemon and 2 oranges. Then he observed his patients. He saw that the 2 people who took lemon and oranges recovered in 6 days and were fit to work. The rest were about to die, and he recovered 8 of them using lemons and oranges. Unfortunately, the patients who took sulfuric acid died. This was the world's first randomized controlled trial, which now has become the gold standard of drug discovery and clinical trials. All medicines that you eat comes after being rigorously tested using the method employed by James Lind, but with controls added. That is why modern science insists that whenever you do a clinical trial, there should be a control group. And this is the reason why I go so hard against alternate forms of treatment like homeopathy and Ayurveda. They do not use control group in any of their trials, and if they used any, like in the case of homeopathy, they fail. This study revolutionized the treatment of scurvy and saved millions of lives. Next in line of explorers was James Cook, the British navigator who traveled to New Zealand and Australia. He succeeded in circumnavigating the world on his first voyage without losing a single man to scurvy, an unusual accomplishment at the time. What James Cook carried with him was a food named sauerkraut, which is one of the national dish of Germany. It is finely cut cabbage that has been fermented by various lactic acid bacteria. It has a long shelf life and a distinctive sour flavor. He also incorporated a strict regime of shipboard cleanliness as well as frequent replenishment of fresh food and greens by stopping at lands at every opportunity. Another beneficial rule implemented by Cook was his prohibition of the consumption of salt fat skimmed from the ship's copper boiling pans, then a common practice elsewhere in the Navy. In contact with air, the copper formed compounds that prevented the absorption of vitamins by the intestines. In 1770, while attempting to reach Australia, his ship ran aground on the Great Barrier Reefs and developed a hole in the hull. It took 23 hours for the crew to get rid of the water using manual pumps, a feat that would have been impossible had the crew had been inflicted by scurvy. They wouldn't have had the energy to drain the water out and be the first non-natives to claim Australia and New Zealand. James Cook might be a hero, but the little yellow fruit was the real savior in this story. Cook was made a Fellow of the Royal Society and was awarded the Copley Gold Medal for completing his second voyage without losing a single man to scurvy, awards which can be equated to the current Nobel Prize. Another major long-distance expedition that experienced virtually no scurvy was that of the Spanish naval officer Alessandro Malaspina in the late 18th century. On a 56-day trip across the sea, only 5 sailors came down with symptoms and 1 was serious. However, all 5 recovered through oranges and lemons. In 1795, a warship named HMX Suffolk reached India from England after a 4-month voyage without a trace of scurvy and with a crew that was healthier than when it set out. That was because the ship was fully supplied with lemon juice and sugar during its voyage. The effect was immediate. The Admiralty or the British Navy acknowledged the demand in the Navy that lemon juice and sugar should in future be issued as a daily ration to the crews of all warships. It took a few years, but by 1800 the system was in place and functioning. This led to remarkable health improvement among the sailors and played a critical role in Britain gaining the advantage in naval battles against enemies who had yet to introduce lemon juice in their diets. Thus, this little yellow fruit in a way helped Britain to conquer the world. So what was in lemon juice that saved the lives of many sailors and helped direct the course of history? It is nothing but a chemical molecule called vitamin C or ascorbic acid. Vitamin C is an essential nutrient involved in the repair of tissue and the formation of collagen, the main structural protein found in the body's various connective tissues like cartilage, bones, tendons, ligaments, and skin. It is required for the functioning of several enzymes and it is also important for immune system function. It also functions as an antioxidant and an antimicrobial agent. While it is conclusive that vitamin C prevents and cures scurvy, there is no evidence for it being effective for COVID, cancer, cardiovascular disease, rheumatoid arthritis, or cataract as claimed. Most animals are able to synthesize their own vitamin C. However, apes, including humans and monkeys, most bats, some rodents, and certain other animals must acquire it from dietary sources. Vitamin C is available in citrus fruits, kiwi fruit, guava, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, bell peppers, potatoes, and strawberries. Prolonged storage or cooking may reduce vitamin C content in food. Compared to plant sources, animal source food do not provide so great an amount of vitamin C, and what there is largely destroyed by the heat used when it is cooked. Chicken eggs contain no vitamin C whether raw or cooked. We lost the ability to produce this important vitamin on our evolutionary journey as somewhere down the line we lost the ability to produce this enzyme. Today we mainly use vitamin C for preserving food and as supplements. But it goes without saying that had we known about this chemical earlier, our history would have been different. Had the earlier Spanish, Dutch or Portuguese navigators like Vasco da Gama had known the importance of vitamin C and had consumed lime juice, I might have been sitting and making this video in Portuguese or Spanish or Dutch instead of in English. The world history would have definitely not been the same if we had known about this molecule earlier. So the next time you're feeling thirsty, reach for a lemon. Just add some lemon juice to your water for a refreshing and healthy drink. Who knows, maybe you will change the course of history too. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please do comment and let me know if you would like to watch similar videos in future about more chemicals which changed the human history. This video wouldn't have been possible without the help and guidance of Kana M. Sureshan, Dean at ISA, Trivandrum. I shall be back soon with yet another scientific temper building episode. Until then, it's bye-bye from Pale Blue Thoughts.